right, if everyone will please sit down, we're going to begin the Sustainability in Fashion panel. My name is Bob Bland. I'm the CEO and founder of Manufacture New York, and I get the high chair today. That's fun. No, I actually feel really weird. But I am so grateful for our organizers, Mimi and Mika, for putting this together. And thanks also so much to everyone over the course of this weekend who has put on a workshop or attended a workshop or come and contributed some great items for sale. This is our first time putting on a sustainability symposium here at Manufacture New York's temporary headquarters. I'm going to talk about it a little later, but our permanent space is currently being built on the 5th floor. Let's introduce today's panelists, and then after that I'm going to give a brief introduction of what Manufacture New York is and where we're at, and from there we will go on to introduce the work of each panelist, and then we're going to get into a discussion regarding sustainability in fashion. But specifically because of the strengths of the folks on this panel today, we're going to veer towards zero waste and textile reclamation and other different areas where we can talk about reducing the amount of waste in the supply chain. So with us today we have Daniel Silverstein. He's a New York-based clothing designer and manufacturer of zero waste apparel. His namesake label has been seen in boutiques and specialty stores around the world, most recently in Oak and Ukes, and is currently launching his first wedding collection exclusively at Scone Bride in Brooklyn, New York. Entertainers such as Kristen Bell, Jennifer Hudson, Amber Valletta, Yael Stone, and a bunch of other famous people have been seen at red carpet events and on magazine covers across the US and England. After starting his collection in 2010, Daniel gained the attention of buyers, audience in the world on season 2 of Fashion Star. And Daniel has mastered the process of small-scale production without textile byproducts being brought to landfill, a process he is now bringing to projects for Manufacture New York, relocating his studio to the Sunset Park Hub, and offering consulting services to a variety of their clients' domestic manufacturing projects. So that's what Daniel's up to. Mimi Prober of Mimi New York creates handcrafted sustainable garments using antique textiles, natural fibers, and organic dyes acquired from the earth. Through hand-sewn construction, embroidery, and zero-waste draping techniques, each piece is developed organically depending on the materials that are uncovered. Mimi's collection pieces have been recognized internationally, shown during New York, Amsterdam, and London Fashion Weeks, worn on the red carpet, featured on television, and in publications like Marie Claire, Forbes, CNBC, and V Magazine. I feel like clapping. Clapping for these people. Sass Brown, who's next to Mimi, is the acting associate dean for the School of Art and Design at the Fashion Institute of Technology. She's originally from London and established herself as a designer with her own signature collection. As a researcher, writer, and educator, her area of expertise is ethical fashion in all its various expressions, from slow design and heritage craft skills to recycle, reuse, and alternative business models. She has published papers, spoken, taught, and advised women's cooperatives, educational institutions, government agencies, NGOs, and the creative industries around the world on the topic of sustainable design. She communicates and promotes the best of ethical fashion design through a multitude of media, most notably her book, Eco Fashion and Refashion, which are available actually today, so please pick up a copy, they're really good. And her website, Eco Fashion Talk by Sass Brown, is exceptional, and they have a newsletter, so if you're not already subscribed to her newsletter, I'd recommend it. And then to her right is Timo Rissanen, and he's an assistant professor of fashion design and sustainability at Parsons since 2010. He holds a PhD in design from University of Technology in Sydney, and his thesis, completed in 2013, focused on zero-waste fashion design. Having lived in Finland, Spain, Australia, and the US, he is interested in local perspectives to global challenges in fashion and design. And in 2011, he co-edited Shaping Sustainable Fashion, and then that was arising from Fashion Now, which was an exhibition that he co-curated in 2009. He also has a book on zero-waste fashion design, co-authored with Holly McQuillan. Yeah, is that how you say her name? Okay. And it's going to be published in December 2015. Tima, do you know what stores that's going to be available at?
It's already available for pre-order on Amazon.
Oh, okay, so it's already available on Amazon, and the book is called?
It's called Zero Waste.
Zero Waste Fashion. Okay, great. Okay, so obviously we've got an immense amount of deep knowledge and talent in sustainability here today, so this is going to be really interesting. And thank you guys so much for taking the time on the weekend to be here. It's kind of hot. I'm going to take off my jacket. And do I need this, or is this? Yeah, it's good. Okay, good, awesome. Happy to do that. Okay, so I'll just kind of go like this. Well, it's weird. How have people been doing it? Somebody else clicking, or?
It was a lower chair.
I want to sleep for about 50
You on this chair?
No, I mean, people can see, so this is fine. Okay, so you're all here today, so maybe you've heard of Manufacture New York, but our mission is to reawaken and rebuild America's fashion industry, foster the next wave of businesses, and create a transparent, sustainable global supply chain. I founded Manufacture in 2012 as a career fashion designer, and I had worked both corporately and then also as an entrepreneur since 2006, doing all my manufacturing locally in Brooklyn. And essentially what was a major problem, and we're still working through it right now, is that fashion designers, manufacturers, everybody who is connected as suppliers, everyone who's a part of the fashion supply chain, they're not all necessarily connected together in the best way possible. So, and that does have a huge impact on sustainability. So, essentially what we're looking to do here with Manufacture New York, and we've brought over the last 2.5 or 3 years, incredibly diverse range of incredibly talented people together onto the Manufacture New York team. And for instance, Patrick Duffy, who is our VP of Sustainability, he's in the back there. So, he has an incredibly interesting and varied experience when it comes to operational efficiency and sustainability in manufacturing systems. And that sort of experience, bringing people like him and Amanda Parks, who's our head of wearable technology, and then other folks from other different areas of fashion or even different industries that touch fashion, need to be communicating together, and they need to have a space that they can actually work together. So what we're looking to do in the long term is create a fashion ecosystem that vertically integrates all the different pieces together, very similar to what is done in some factories overseas. And I did some, I oversaw some production overseas when I was in corporate, and I saw systems where it was quite vertically integrated, and it really did work. Obviously for them, they weren't embedding sustainability, they weren't making it transparent, we had no idea where anything came from, that sort of thing. So it wasn't perfect, but why not apply that to local manufacturing and to folks who are starting out, emerging designers in this new generation. So by connecting the dots and including business development and design development and product development services for emerging brands through our Incubator Accelerator program, and along with a vertically integrated manufacturing center, which is what we're establishing here we got a $3.5 million grant awarded to us last December from the New York City Economic Development Corporation to create. Yeah, I gotta say, it's like 2 years of I'm grateful, but like the last 2 years, you know, it's, yeah, it's, so we're calling it the Manufacturing Innovation Center for Apparel, Textiles, and Wearable Technology, and it's based on a proposal that we submitted to the EDC in June of 2013, just to give you some context. So we're still working on it. But the idea is that by integrating manufacturers, contract manufacturers, and specifically those who are getting displaced from the garment district or those that are starting out, into a hub where all the different specialties are in one place. A workforce training center is established on site so that they can upgrade their equipment and that they can get new skills. It's something that would dovetail very nicely with the Fashion Manufacturing Initiative, which is another great initiative that New York City is providing. And then also a wearable tech R&D center, because let's face it, you hear about tech constantly, right? And you know, that's something where when technologists or folks from Silicon Valley come into the fashion industry, they think they're gonna like disrupt it. And it's just not, that's not really the way it works with such an extended supply chain and a complex process. So we need to work together with these folks to make sure that they're also keeping an eye towards sustainability and process from the beginning. And then we're about here right now, and we're going around towards, we're working on establishing a fund for designers, we're working on retail and distribution is going to be a big focus for us in 2016, and all of that is on a ground of sustainability focus. So, so bringing all the parts together. Let me see, and this is like a little map of what, a very basic idea of what process innovation means for Manufacturing New York, which is bringing the collaborative economy on site in one place where you can literally go across the hall and get something done. You know, we're all humans. We're working with a very practically material world when you're talking about fashion. You know, so the virtual, like the internet, all that stuff, it does play a part. You know, and there is a lot of innovative work that can be done when we bring those two worlds together. But ultimately, everything's material. You know, so we, having people all in one place, proximity to location proximity, and then also proximity to innovation and new ideas and new talent is really a crucial part of this model moving forward. And then in terms of timeline, I think the only other thing that I really want to, yeah, and we also got an Obama grant. And SBS right now, we're doing a grant with them for workforce training, so we're going to be doing a lot of apprenticeship programs. We also have some other exciting partnerships in the works for internships and continuing education with some institutions here in New York City. And then we're also working with the DoD, MIT, Cornell, RISD, and a few other schools, including FIT, on a grant proposal for a revolutionary textile and fibers manufacturing institute, which is an initiative of the Obama administration, where they want to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. and they want it to be different. They want it to be better than what's available overseas because they want us to be competitive and for there to be jobs moving forward. So we spent the whole summer on this manufacturing institute proposal that will allow us to bring specifically a regional hub for this National Manufacturing Institute, and then also specifically will be in charge of the apprenticeships and internships for the entire nation. And so that would be really exciting to help nationalize a knowledge base of programs around educating people into textile and fiber jobs, especially the next generation of that. So finally, I think I'll just say that in terms of our timeline for this project, we currently, as you can see, are taking a temporary space here at Liberty View Industrial Plaza. The folks at Liberty View, Selmar Properties, are the owner, have recently completed a $100 million renovation on this building. So it's literally the highest quality industrial space in New York City right now. And that's one reason we picked it. So now that they're done with that renovation, and we just signed the contract with New York City for this manufacturing innovation hub in June. So we were just able to disperse the first payment to the architect like Friday. And so, running at the speed of government. So, now we're to the point that we can start to do the planning process. And what I'm looking forward to over the next couple months is having a bunch of planning meetings where we invite the whole community to come and help us plan the space for specific things. So for folks who are into sustainability, we'll have a big planning meeting where anyone who wants to be there, who cares about sustainability, can help us plan how are we going to embed that into the space. And for folks who care about workforce training, how do you want the workforce training center? What's the optimal usage of this? For manufacturers, what's the most important thing for you? And then of course for designers, how do you want your space to look? And we'll probably do a lot of ideation around that and actually involve the designers in designing the space. So that's going to be really exciting over the next few months and a way for us to bring the community together. In the meantime, if you need space and you're a designer and you don't mind being a little open, we have space for you. If you're a manufacturer and you're in trouble and you're getting displaced immediately, we will make something work for you for now, and then I would just say that also within this building, it's a 1.2 million square foot building. Each floor is 160,000 square feet. So there are some subdivided spaces immediately available on other floors. So if anybody needs 7,000 to 20,000 square feet from, well, not you guys, but you all have contract manufacturers, you have people you talk to. Space is such a problem in New York City right now. And the whole premise of this is we want to get that out of the equation by providing affordable, long-term, high-quality space, which is what this does. We'll be able to provide space 10, 15, 20 years, specifically for industrial. And that's available now. So we'll do the planning this fall. Hopefully we'll break ground, ideally we'll break ground Q1 in next year. And then we're just going to build it out in phases as we get interested. We're going to need everybody in the community to help us get the word out about it, because the more space it's still a real estate project. The more space we fill with manufacturers, the faster we can build. So, okay, well, that's my little thing on manufacture. And now I'm going to hand the mic over to Sass Brown.
Wow, this has been so long coming, I forgot I actually had a PowerPoint. Okay, I guess I have images. Let me sort of reintroduce myself a little bit. Basically, I'm a writer, researcher, educator in the sustainable space. My background's working with women's cooperatives mostly in the developing world or the craft sector, and helping them take craft traditional products to market in an international market. So these are the last two books I wrote. I'm in the process of number 3 at the moment. First one is eco-fashion, a term I don't even use anymore. It's sort of a bit outdated in terms. Eco's been so overutilized and misrepresented. I would never call my book that anymore, but such is the name. But the point was, when it came out, it was about connecting the dots. There's so much really interesting, phenomenal work being done around the world in the emerging marketplace. And I have the great fortune of having worked with many of those marketplaces and many of those independent designers and groups and cooperatives. But it's about communicating what's being done in the sustainable space around the world, because there's amazing things. And everybody's working in their little pockets. So to connect them, whether that's through my books, whether it's through the website, whether it's through my writing for magazines like Coco Echo, the blog, etc. That's really what it's about. It's about communicating really great work that's happening in the ethical space. When the first book came out, there wasn't very much in the written in the written world about ethical fashion that was beautiful. They were all talking about boring beige organic t-shirts, and I'm really not interested in them. I think we've got enough boring beige t-shirts out there that are unsustainable, so let's use them to begin with. So I'm really much more interested in high design, particularly cutting edge design, and how it intersects with sustainability, whether that's slow fashion, whether it's artisanal skills, whether it is organic materials, whether it's zero waste, all of the different intersections of sustainability. Second book came out, the first one, and it's on designers working with upcycled materials, just because there was so much material I couldn't possibly fit it into the first book. As you probably gather, I'm English, and a lot of it's actually happening in the UK. What I realised when I wrote the books is, my publisher is British, but publishing isn't a money-making venture for most people anymore. So one of the things that my publisher likes to do, and they pushed me into doing, was having global coverage of designers around the world, which I was doing to a certain extent with my writing anyway, but they pushed me to do further, simply because one of the ways publishers make money is transliterating your text for other partner publishers around the world. So if there weren't any Spanish designers in there, they weren't going to get the Spanish language version, etc., etc. And the book is published in Spanish and Italian. And interestingly enough, Spanish is the most popular version. Both books sold out in Spanish quite some time ago. It's really about connecting all those dots, and a lot of what I learned from writing this was each location has a particular strength, a lot of the time based on culture and based on history and heritage. And the UK have an enormous strength in upcycling designers because they have a long history of respect for vintage fashion and a long history of make, do and mend, so the leap to upcycling was minimal for them. So there's a great preponderance of designers working in upcycled materials in the UK. That said, they're not all British designers in the book. This is the website, Ecofashion Talk, so it really is just a space to, again, communicate and curate. That's really what it's about, communicating, curating what work is being done out there in multiple different spaces. So whether it's a long-form blog post about, this was actually just last week, so this one here is on cultural appropriation, or misappropriation actually. We've got featured items, we've got manufacturers, designers, and books, so we have to do TMOs soon actually. So as Bob said, there's a newsletter you can sign up for, and it just gives you little tastes of what's happening on the website, and then you can follow through. That would be Europe next, I guess. So that's really that's really what I'm doing. I'm connecting, I'm communicating, and I'm curating about what I think is the best in ethical fashion at all tiers of distribution. I tend to default to the higher end, and when you're talking about designers that are working with slow design or artisanal skills or one-offs, inevitably they tend to be in the higher price bracket. But I'm a great believer in conscious consumption and buying pieces that you love, that you will want for the rest of your life, that you will wear for a long time, that you will mend if they need mending rather than throwing away. As much as there are some interesting things happening in mainstream, ultimately it's not sustainable. So I think this is where we need to be, and it's what I believe in, what I write about, and what I wear. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Seth. And thank you, Bob, for inviting me to be here today, and thank you all for coming. So on the left, you see what was my vision for menswear in Australia in 2003. And on the right, didn't change much in the next 5 years. That's from 2008. And so, just to give you a bit of background, as Bob mentioned in the introduction, I'm originally from Finland, but then in '96 I moved to Australia to study fashion. That wasn't the reason I moved to Australia. I actually fell in love, and then the rest came afterwards. I graduated in '99 from the University of Technology, Sydney, And in the final year, we had to do not just a collection, but also a written thesis. My written thesis at the time was on Madeleine Vionnet, the French designer, and her influence on Issa Miyake, John Galliano, and Claire McCardell. And in the conclusion of that dissertation, I speculated that it might be possible to design clothes in a way that didn't waste any fabric, because if you look at Madeleine Vionet's work, there's an incredible affinity with the width of the fabric that she would work with. And she worked with a lot of mills in France and had fabrics woven to very specific widths for her work. And anyway, that was in 1999. Then I graduated, went into the industry in Sydney, had my own brand from 2001 to 2004. And I do wish that something like this existed in Sydney at the time, because I think things might have turned very differently had it been the case. But at the same time, in 2004, when I actually decided to take a break for 1 or 2 seasons, and it's now 2015, the opportunity to do a PhD arose at UTS, where I'd done my undergraduate, and so I knew straight away that I wanted to go back to that research from 5 years earlier. And it didn't even have a name at the time, Zero Waste Fashion Design. I don't know, that name kind of just organically came into being around 2006, 2007, 2008. Mark Liu, he came from UTS as well, but then did the MA in Textile Futures at St. Martin's, and I think he was among the first to use the name. But then Yeo Lee Teng here in New York had been doing zero waste since the early 80s. And so there was this global community around this idea that became zero waste fashion design, and of course there's now more of us, and you will both be in the second edition of the book. So as Bob mentioned, I have a book coming out with Holly McQuillan, who's a dear friend in New Zealand, and has been researching zero waste for over a decade as well. And I actually became aware of Danielle's work. We were very much finished with the research for the book, and to insert anything, and Taz would know this, like once you're past a certain point with a book, like to put anything in there is like... Anyway, so you will be in the next edition. This is kind of where I'm at now. So I'm still doing zero waste. So these are 2 different versions of this shirt. So it's a zero waste shirt that I did in 2009. And I'm now working on a project where I'm actually making these shirts for real people, real men. Because my interest has kind of shifted through a few projects that I've been involved in, particularly Local Wisdom, which was a project led by Kate Fletcher from London College of Fashion, that Parsons participated in, and it was really focusing on how people use clothes. And the underlying idea for me is that we're heading to a future where we'll have less clothes than we might have today. If an average American owns 68 garments, or buys 68 garments per year, that is not something we will be able to sustain moving forward. And at the same time, with Kate's work and my own work, there is this underlying idea that doesn't necessarily mean any decrease in the quality of our lives. In fact, I think we can probably have an improved quality of life with less things. And so the project that I'm working on now is participating with a number of men who get a version of this shirt. I actually redesigned the shirt with each guy for them, so that it's actually something they would want to wear, because this is not what everybody would want to wear, or what I'm wearing. And so there's this element of co-design as well, or user-centered design, and so that's kind of what I'm moving into, and also these ideas of customization and repair and alteration, like how can fashion design facilitate those? Because I do want to sort of see a future as well where consumers, now I don't actually use the word consumer anymore, I use the word user or wearer, but I do want to see a future where users and wearers are more empowered to actually mess with the things that they own, because I think fashion sometimes puts these barriers on people. Fashion is presented in a way that it's like this high untouchable thing, and I understand, I mean, that's how I was trained myself, but it also inadvertently puts barriers on things, people customizing things, and altering things. And so that's where I've headed, because I also think that some of these things, and I think the final image is some repair that I did on that original shirt. I actually got caught in a door wearing that shirt, and I'm one of the clumsiest people I know. I get caught in furniture, so watch out. I got caught in a door and created a huge hole in the shirt, and this is how I repaired it. So this idea of visible repair or visible mending, which I know Sass has done a lot of research on as well, is another research interest of mine. So we had a Facebook conversation yesterday about that. Anyway, so that's in a nutshell what I'm about. So thanks again for having me.
My pleasure. So I'm Daniel, and thank you guys so much for coming. And it's sort of very surreal for me. Sass Brown interviewed me to go on the study abroad program at FIT as a student, and now being able to sit in a place with her is like mind-blowing, so cool. She's an idol and a very, very impressive person. So thank you for having me and for putting me in such great company. So I recently moved my studio to Manufacture New York. I started my line, just my name, Daniel Silverstein, in late 2010, and my whole concept was that I had come from a traditional, conventional fashion design background. I always wanted to be my own designer. I always saw myself kind of getting into the fashion industry, starting my own brand, and then having this eponymous label, and I was going to move to New York and make it in the fashion industry. And right when I graduated from school, I started working in traditional kind of big business. I had interned in very high level design and very low level design, and was just sort of trying to figure out where I fit in. And I was sort of a low level consumer, but a high level lover, and like all that kind of stuff. And working in mass production, it became very aware that we were passing the cost of our waste on to our customers, and a lot of our waste was happening overseas, and it was something that I ethically had a really strong reaction to. I actually had to excuse myself from a costing meeting at class education from an incredible school. I had done a study abroad program. I had had all of these fabulous instructors at FIT and Politecnico in Milan. And so I had to be, if someone from my school wasn't able to design with no waste, then no one was able to, so I had to start trying. And it really just started from a point of almost research. It was like a case study. I was doing this case study, and can you make something worth wearing that is also zero waste? So I started on that journey and that path over time. And to my good fortune, putting those products out there and making things with this zero waste concept made them more exciting to look at, because the restrictions that zero waste places on you as a designer forces you to make things that look different from the rest of the things that are on the shelf for one reason or another. So I started with many different concepts. This is a piece that was sold at Oak in New York, downtown Soho. I guess now they're international, but that was then. And this is just designing with one continuous material. So how do you take one long thing and cut it at the very end and just loop it all together and wrap it all together to make something worth having? This is another piece using a similar concept. Every single braid is made from a solid rectangle of fabric, and I use the entire piece. And the dress underneath is simply a column gown made of a rectangle of fabric. So recently I've started sort of a new journey of zero waste. It's very important for me to make wearable, affordable, viable products. And I was mentioning to Sass earlier that part of being a sustainable designer had made my life unsustainable. I was no longer able to afford running my sustainable business, and the overhead of this industry is so impressively large. So I recently relocated to Manufacture New York and have been the beneficiary of the incredible work that Bob Bland and her team have done to make this space a reality. And by having affordable space and the synergy of on-site product development, and the inspiration of other incredible designers like Mimi in the space who are also zero waste, and being able to have the support of a community that can help realize the goal of zero waste, but not just realize it, support it, and make it something that is encouraged. You know, so much of the fashion industry at large sort of says, "Ooh, that's different, we're not sure, we don't want it, it's a risk, we don't want to put money on that if it's not a sure thing," but being encouraged to express and explore that. So recently I've moved my business into two different directions. One of them is a high-end wedding and special occasion line, which I am able to, again, like Sass was saying, be in that higher price bracket, use more artisanal techniques and slower production. And I'm in the process of developing with Manufacture New York a more wearable streetwear line like the top that I'm wearing right now, which is zero waste by completing the process for someone else, absorbing other people's scraps, and helping other companies be zero waste by taking their leftovers and making upcycled products. And it's almost not even upcycled, because that process of cutting, which you guys all know, that's pre-consumer waste. We throw out things before they've ever been used. And so it's really about trying to reapproach production and make a product out of something that shouldn't ever be thrown away. So that's a little bit about my business and what I'm doing and where my zero waste inspiration came from. And I'm gonna hand it off to Mimi.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for coming as well, and I feel the same way that Daniel does to be on the panel with Sass. I'm also from FIT, so it's amazing to have that. There we go. I'll make this quick so we can start our dialogue, but I am also a designer. I create handcrafted garments using antique textiles. All the pieces that I use are fragments of pieces that were from the 1700s up to the 1920s. I do everything by hand. It's a very slow approach, slow craft. And this started as my thesis at FIT. I won several awards and kind of got really great recognition, and figured that this was something that needed to be shown. So I've continued to do it for a few years now. So basically my philosophy by nature is zero waste, because of the fragments that I use. It kind of dictates what I design. It's my goal to make this into modern pieces, wearable pieces that tell a story of the previous eras, but can take it into a modern way and carry on to future generations. So this is a photo of two of my dresses. The one on the right was actually recently worn to the Mission Impossible premiere, so that was fun. And this is jet beadwork and materials, Chantilly lace from the 1800s, all hand sewn. So I do a lot of editorial, celebrity, custom pieces, and am working on a more accessible line. And this is also some more images of my pieces on the left. This is all hundreds of pieces of small antique laces that I hand draped into one garment. And this also is the same philosophy. You can kind of see the color on the silk that I bundle dyed, which I co-taught a workshop on that yesterday. So anyways, that's me, and I can start our dialogue.
Wow, thank you. It's so nice to hear what everyone's doing. And so I think one of the main things that I'd love for us to all talk to together is these are incredible individual practices that each of you have, and there are so many other incredibly passionate, talented people around the world who are doing this, but there's two big concerns. How do we get more designers individually to choose these practices, and then how do we get corporations to be able to bridge that gap? So let's start with the hardest question, corporations. Like, how are we going to get them into this process?
So I'm just going to start because I'm holding this mic, but I'll keep it brief so everyone can answer. I think the number one thing for corporations is that by being zero waste, you're able to make more profits per yield, your yield is better. You're using more of your raw materials, and so there's a huge financial incentive to that aspect. Also, the carting away and disposing of fabric waste is incredibly expensive, so by reducing that expense as well, you're again making corporations more profitable. And from my end, personally, being a designer at Manufacture New York, I'm starting to work with Amanda, who you guys have, Amanda Parks, Dr. Amanda Parks, who you guys have heard about, who is the head of wearable technology, and trying to put a plan in motion to make this into a software that other companies would be able to use, so their designs could be zero waste without them having to really think about it.
So I definitely agree with everything you say. I also think that as the consumer becomes more aware, there's going to be a necessity for the mass market to kind of recognize that. And I also hope it includes zero waste, but also the way that the workers are treated and all of that as well, because I think that that fashion and not even fashion, just the way you make clothes is a very human process. I was saying this yesterday, that people don't even, I think, realize, the average consumer, that people still probably make their clothes. So that dollar t-shirt that you're buying sounds like a great deal. Somebody made that, and it's heartbreaking if you think about that, because there's a lot of work that goes into that.
Oh, this is such a thorny question. There are obviously corporations at large scale that are doing things, not necessarily ones that I completely agree with. I think the mainstreaming of ethical fashion is a challenge in and of itself. When you've got companies like H&M who are doing conscious collections, who are using organic cottons, etc., that's still ultimately not sustainable. It's a stepping stone on getting us to where we need to be, but it's not an answer. Having clothing as it is at the moment, which is basically as a throwaway, something that you spend as little on as, you know, the Chinese takeout that you had the night before, and consider as little as when you throw away, is not a sustainable future for a clothing industry. As Mimi says, people make clothing, it comes from somewhere, it affects environmental issues, all sorts of things, and ultimately we all have to become much more conscious about what we are purchasing and what we are paying for with those dollars, who's making, where it's coming from, what the ramifications are, whether it's waste, whether it's pollution, all of those different issues. We live in an information age where getting this information on companies is really easy. It's a few clicks away on Google. So to not know the heritage of what you're purchasing at this day and age really almost isn't conscionable. You need to know what you're paying for with your dollars. And ultimately brands, whether they want to grapple with these issues or they don't, they're led by their customers, by people wanting to pay for that. And that sooner or later they're going to be limited by resource limitations. If most of our synthetic fabrics come from oil, if much of our natural fibers are grown, when we have a massive global population growth, these are all challenges that we're going to have to deal with globally in the long term. And so decisions will be made about cheap material access, because it won't be cheap for very much longer.
Just going back to the question of corporations, I think one of the challenges that companies have, and I've bumped up against this when I've visited companies and talked about zero waste fashion design in particular, is initially the lack of understanding about the processes, but then also the systemic challenges in that one company I visited 4 years ago, a very well-known company here in New York. They actually invited me for 2 visits. One was to the design office, which was, on Manhattan, and the other was to the technical design team, which was 45 minutes up the river. And to me, that's already a challenge, because you really need to have those 2 groups of people talking together if you're going to do a zero waste anything in a company like that. And but I do, when I look at the sort of long term of that, I expect that will start to shift, because around the world, the conversation around fashion education is shifting, and I know that, for example, if you think of the big 3 in New York, Pratt, FIT and Parsons, all 3 institutions have faculty now who talk about these things and have been to my knowledge, been talking about these things for a long time, and including zero waste as well. Even at Parsons, I'm not the only person who can teach it. There's a number of faculty who can. And then, you know, Holly's work in New Zealand, and also 4 years ago I was contacted by a school in Finland, where I'm from, because they'd seen some of the articles about me, and they just taught themselves, 2 teachers taught themselves to teach zero waste to their students, apparently by reading a lot of my blog posts and Holly's, which was very touching. But so, I do think over time we're going to have more and more people in the industry who talk about these things and are interested in these things. There are still those systemic challenges, because you do need for zero waste to happen, to be possible. You need manufacturing to become a design conversation as well. And actually places like this will be crucial in that, because you can still have design and manufacturing physically separate, but the conversation between the two needs to completely transform.
That's great, yeah, and thank you, Tima, for touching on the systemic challenges, because that is one of the big concerns, is that awareness, of course, as we talked about, is one thing, but then to integrate that into the actual pre-existing supply chain is almost essential, as opposed to transforming the entire $2 trillion a year global textile supply chain, you know. So I guess what I'd love to hear the panelists talk about more then is, you know, what ultimately has to happen, because I noticed with fast fashion, you know, H&M is a name that comes up a lot. They recently notably put out a $1 million prize for solutions to textile waste, and this could be everything from reuse to zero waste to textile recycling. But how do you guys feel about somebody like H&M putting out an award like that? Like, what does that mean to you?
I mean, I think it's great. The quick answer is that it's great. You know, it's not. Without dissecting it too much and overthinking it too much, the fact that such a large company is thinking about awarding someone and inspiring people to solve the challenge is a really great thing. I think it shows large-scale potential for a need for this kind of design, and I think that it sort of touches on, it's almost like a cross between the first question that you asked, you know, how do we make this possible for corporations, and this corporation is saying, who can make this possible? So I think one of the biggest leaps or, you know, challenges between those two is the educational part of it, which fortunately there are people like Timo who are starting to teach this, but any production is a challenge. So whether it's something that's been going on for a really long time, classic draping, pattern making, or a couture runway gown, any kind of production is a challenge. And so as soon as you have designers and craftspeople who are skilled enough at understanding the mindset of zero waste, the actual pattern making and the actual draping of it is not super complicated. I have yet to meet a designer who I have shown a zero waste pattern to who didn't understand what they were looking at. And so if you can train people in the mindset and inspire people that this is possible, then when the next generation of people graduate from schools like FIT, Parsons, and Pratt with a deep-rooted knowledge in the ability to produce zero waste garments, the design community can then take control of that conversation and say, this is how we make things because we designed it that way.
That's really an excellent point, and I
I
don't know
mean,
that
but
I
what
can
about,
say.
come on, again, who are we talking about here? This is H&M.
H&M.
So what about the amount of, Tima's dying over here. Yeah.
And I acknowledge first up that I have engaged in a lot of H&M bashing over the years on my blog. I'm like, if you know from The Simpsons, the grandfather shouting at a cloud. I sometimes feel like I'm him shouting at H&M. But I do think it's very interesting when H&M starts talking about a circular economy, because if you look at the sort of the truest definitions of what a circular economy is, it is an economy of a finite size. It is not an economy based on this idea of limitless growth. And then you look at what H&M is doing. They opened roughly around 360 stores in 2014, and they're set to open about 400 stores this year. And you know, their CEO has said that they need to grow at that rate in order to afford sustainability, which is cute at best. But nonetheless, I do think that given who H&M is in the world, I mean, it's a brand that everybody recognizes, even in countries where they're not yet. I mean, they only arrived in Australia a couple of years ago, I think. You know, people know who they are, and I do think that it's a positive thing when a company like H&M starts talking about those things, even if they are not, as a company, ready yet to be there. But I think it was a very brave thing of them to do. And I do think that given the size of the incentive, you know, it will lead to some real innovation around, because the thing that they've really called for is innovation around recycling fibers. And it's, you know, it's one piece of the big puzzle, but it's not an insignificant one, because as Daniel was saying before, particularly with a number of synthetics, you know, there's issues to do, like landfill is not the right place for synthetics. Well, it's not really there shouldn't be landfills. We should actually design out landfills completely, and we could do that quite quickly, actually.
Okay, so now that we're on the topic of recycling, synthetic versus natural, what's to be done? It's quite a, you know, are we supposed to not grow cotton anymore, or like what are we doing?
I think much like the corporate versus artisanal conversation, at this stage there needs to be multiple conversations, multiple answers. It's not as simple as cotton's good, polyester's bad, or polyester can be recycled, that's good, cotton can't, and you should be growing crops, therefore that's bad. You can argue it any which way, and there are lots of other materials to bring into that conversation. I don't think there is a single solution, and I think it would be a mistake to try and focus on a single solution. I think we need many, many solutions, and that goes back to, you know, H&M's award. I think they're not the ultimate solution, but they're definitely one of the stepping stones to get there. And it's vital that companies like that are financing awards like this in the meantime. But are they sustainable business? Absolutely not. You can't open 300 to 400 new stores every year and sustain your material consumption or any of that. It's not a sustainable model, that constant global growth. But I think that there are many conversations. There are challenges to every one of them. Cotton is a heavy water user. It does use arable land, which could be used for growing food. We do have food shortages and problems. Most synthetic fibers come from an oil base. There are obviously major challenges with that, and that's a finite source. There are lots of other materials to bring into that conversation, but it's usually about those two. And I think recycling polyester is obviously one of those answers, utilising organic cotton and any number of other fibres, from banana fibre to soy milk to sasawashi to, you know, artisanal fabrications. There are so many answers, and we need to explore all of those and do them all simultaneously.
So another question is, okay, well, since we're talking about hypotheticals here, if you had say you got a grant for $200,000 tomorrow, what would you use it on? What would be your use as a designer, a researcher, an academic, a business person? What would you do with $200,000 to help solve the problems of sustainability? I'm not talking about cruise or something.
I don't know. I think on a general point, it depends what your market is and where your standpoint is. I think as a whole, it's important to integrate the whole community. So like whether it's about sustainable zero waste, that is very important. The workers, the artisans, it just really depends what your goal is for that. Personally, for what I would do, I guess I would try to expand my story and my business and incorporate more people, more artisans that can handcraft and help me do that, so I can grow my brand.
I sort of have like a dual answer for you, and one is that sort of going back to your last question, there is no one answer, exactly like everyone else has been saying, but one thing seems like crystal clear to me that I just want to like stand on the roof and shout to everybody. You can't decide cotton, you can't decide polyester, less waste is better. Throwing it away is not the answer. So I think that it seems really clear that sustainability there is a very important part of it is rooted in the idea of zero waste. So that's just that sort of side of it. And leading into your question, I think what I would really want to spend my fund or money or where I see the future of this going is automating that process for other people. It's very clear that people are slow to take it up because it seems daunting or like a lot of work, but like if you guys wouldn't mind raising your hands for me, if you had the ability to design your garment and plug it into software like a Photoshop or an Illustrator or any sort of CAD program and it would make it zero waste for you, would you use it? So I think that's what I would want to use the money for. I think technology is definitely the future, and I think what's missing is a lot of automating things that it's very important for us to do brain-based right now.
I think to get back to that, there are many answers. I think the point here is you have to work with what you're passionate about and what you believe in, and it may not be the ultimate answer, and it may not be the single thing that's going to make the greatest difference, but it's what you can do and what you can add to that conversation and how you can move the entire thing forward. For me, my first love is working with artisans and craftsmanship, particularly in the developing world. And I think it's one of the great sadnesses of our time that we're losing much of that craftsmanship and artisanship, that heritage and the culture that goes with it. So for me, it's working with them, and that's a very small scale response to it, but nevertheless, it's one that does need ongoing investment and support, and it needs the connection between those artisans and designers to find sustainable, ongoing markets for their products, and for truly valuing them and paying for them at a real cost instead of as an undervalued product.
As Sas kind of pointed to, there's countless responses to the question, like the question of how would you use 200,000, because my mind's, I've used it about 25 times already in the time that everybody else was responding on different things. And I do think that Sas hit on a point, like it really is about where your passions are. And the great thing is that, we all have different passions and we need all of those because collectively, that's what makes the difference actually in the world. Individually, it's very difficult for any of us to make a huge difference, but collectively, it's massive. So a couple of things. I do think that there's still work for us to be done around, particularly around the victims of Rana Plaza. And there's compensation that still would go a long way in helping them, as well as helping a whole lot of other people in a number of countries, not just Bangladesh. But I think, and I had this and now I forgot what the other thing was. Actually, no, it was, now I remember. I need to look at you because it's the Alabama Channon top that you're wearing. So Alabama Channon, I hope most of you know, is a company based in Alabama. And Natalie Channon, who founded the company, she works with artisans around Alabama who manufacture the garments and mostly by hand, in fact. It's very recent that they've introduced machine sewing. I would like to replicate that kind of model in different places, including here in New York City, because I do think that there's a lot of people in New York City with the kind of abilities, and you can actually train people fairly quickly to do these things as well. And particularly, I would look at areas of high unemployment and see what the opportunities might be to engage people in these new kinds of manufacturing.
Yeah, we should definitely, when we get to the workforce training, we should absolutely talk about that some more because I think we could really get some support around that. So. Okay, well, I would just like to we're going to do a Q&A because I'm sure you guys have some great questions for our panelists. My last question for you guys is, do you have an inspiring book or a movie or a person or somebody who's inspiring you right now that you'd like to share with our audience?
This one I know what I would say. Definitely Eco Fashion Talk and her books Eco Fashion and Refashion, for sure. Sass Brown, amazing. Eco Fashion Talk, she shares so much content on so many incredible designers, whether it's something that you would want to buy or something you're inspired by, you have to check it out. Your knowledge will gain a million times. And then also American Fashion Podcast is Charles over there. His podcast has grown so large recently, and he has some amazing guests on it, and I had the honor of being on it as well. Sass, and on there if he hasn't been on there, and Timo. But those are the two standouts for me.
I mean, obviously, I cannot wait to read your book, Timo, and I own both of your books. And I think I know what Timo's going to say. I'm not sure. I think I know. So I don't want to repeat. But one thing that I saw recently as like a total, like, oh, I don't know what to watch tonight kind of thing, the Discovery Channel did a very short program, I think it's an hour or less, called What is the Earth Worth? And it kind of breaks down all of the natural resources available on Earth and the amount of them, and it was very eye-opening for me. So I would definitely encourage, for the sheer scale of understanding what is on our planet and how grossly we're taking advantage of it, I think it's a really great, great crash course.
Gosh, well, I'm obviously waiting for Timo's book to come out, so that's one I can't yet speak about, but I'm sure it'll be excellent. And it's in a topic matter that's really needed, which is zero waste, because I know very little other publications, people that have touched on it like myself, but not real experts like Timo. I think probably at the moment, a lot of my inspirations are in the video space, are in film, and I think we're at a really interesting time where there's a number of documentaries already out or coming out in the near future, and I think film reaches an entirely different audience. I think some of our ongoing challenge in this space, those of us that write and speak and so on in it, is we're so often preaching to the converted, the people that buy our books, the people that come to our talks, the people who already have an interest in this topic matter. But reaching people outside of that is an ongoing challenge, and I think film has the ability to do that. Much more so than the written word in many ways. For that reason, I'm actually partnering with a filmmaker for my next book, so a documentary comes out at the same time, so that we can both access different audiences. They can access my ethical fashion written word audience, and I can access theirs. But I would say right now, the True Cost has made an incredible impact, and I think reached people that none of us could have reached. Sadly, it's been on the back of things like the Rana Plaza disaster that has raised that interest. But I think whether it's that Thread documentary, the Cotton Road, there are so many coming out that are really raising the profile on this. So I would say in the video space at the moment.
I second the True Cost. For me, it was seeing it for the first time. I realized that I didn't learn anything new from it because we've been in that work for over a decade, but I'd never seen it presented like that, and I couldn't speak for about 15 minutes afterwards, and I still have that. I've seen it 4 times now, and I had to moderate a panel on Friday. I had to step in for someone and moderate a panel with Andrew Morgan, the director, and I had to collect myself very quickly when the film finished, because then we had to get on stage and talk about it, and I was still in my kind of couldn't breathe stage. So that and also The Cotton Road by Laura Kissel, an amazingly touching documentary about the you know, the travels of cotton from the US to China and then back. And then book-wise, there's a guy called John Ehrenfeld, and his website is johnerenfeld.com, so it's EHRENFELD. He wrote a book 2 years ago called Flourishing, and he actually has sort of summed it up, saying sustainability is the possibility of human beings being able to flourish on the planet, or something to that effect. And I really love his, he sort of elaborates in the book what he means by flourishing, and it is this really holistic vision for both humanity and the planet, and that kind of for me is the underlying framework for all of the work that all of us do, and so that's what I would recommend.
Great, and the True Cost is available on Netflix, so you have zero excuses. You have to watch it, it's required. So, no, I'm just kidding. And I would just say that for me, if you want to get an idea of how my personal philosophy around economic development and how it pertains to all of this, the book, it's a classic, but you probably haven't read it, Small is Beautiful, by E.F. Schumacher, I believe. I would highly recommend that. And then the corollary, because it's not just about our development physically and as a culture, it's also about our internal world and our heart and everything that composes us. I'm a big fan of the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and it has nothing to do with fashion or sustainability, but having a life that's filled with meaning will allow us to lose some of that attachment towards material things. That is really us just filling a hole inside ourselves, you know, because I think that's where a lot of this consumerism comes from, is that the way our capitalist system has grown has created a world devoid of meaning that used to be there. So anyway, but that's just my philosophy. So, okay, Q&A, yes.
I'm Tilly Williams, I'm spot over there. Before I ask my question, I want to recommend two books that changed my mind. Anyway, the Anti-Capitalist Book of Fashion by Tansy Hoskin is incredible. Also, Cradle to Cradle and Upcycle by Cradle to Cradle team. It's really pertinent to all of this information. My other question is, what kind of retail spaces have you seen that are really accepting of zero waste, of sustainable fashion? Like, what are these markets that are most accepting of this movement that you discovered?
I think the most interesting things that are happening in the retail space are digital, quite honestly, and I think they're independent. So whether they're individual designer spaces or whether they're multi-brand, but I think most of them are individual designer spaces, and that whole challenging system of the tradition of wholesalers, retail markup, agents, etc., is one of the most interesting ones. I think the future is much richer with a plethora of small emerging designers sustaining themselves out there. That's what I like to see and what I think is happening. Whether it's Natalie, you can buy online, you don't have to be in Florence, Alabama to get an Alabama Channing thing like that. Buy a British designer who upcycles vintage waste, also available online. The jackets by an upcycling designer in Berlin, also available online. All of them have their independent retail spaces and they sell directly to the public. Some of them do pop-ups, whether they're or have their own retail outlet, but mostly they're in the digital space.
Yeah, I actually find that just in general, I like selling directly, which it has its own challenges, but I think that being able to sort of control and curate some of the packaging aspects of it is one of the biggest challenges as a zero waste designer that I experience. You know, I can be a zero waste designer and I can make a zero waste product, but I can't change your shipping manual from wanting me to put it in a plastic bag. So that's very frustrating from the sort of the wholesale end. And I think that like word of mouth is the best retail space for me.
Well, my business model currently is based on custom, so I do a lot of word of mouth, reach out, media, that kind of thing. I'm working on branching into retail. I would say actual spaces that are good for designers, probably ABC Carpet and Home. They really support the whole philosophy of what we are doing, and digitally, not just the label for kind of more cutting edge designers.
In terms of a couple more sustainable in the digital space, I think Ethica is great. I think Motivante is still around. And just and like you were saying, not just the label. And I think Zadie. Yes, that was Zadie. And there's another one in the UK that I can't think of, but if it comes to me, I'll let you know. But I do really like the whole digital space. There are people who are kind of curating it for us, which is nice.
Great. Next question. You first.
Hi, my question's for Daniel. So you said you connect with other places that put out material and you like kind of upcycle from them. So how do you connect with them?
So right now I'm in the process of sort of solidifying some of those relationships, and most of them are coming from personal relationships. So I did a lot of internships, I have friends who work in the industry, and I just got a brand new neighbor at Manufacture New York, and they agreed to give me their waste. So it's pretty exciting how really, really small personal connections can instantly make big changes. And since I'm able to have Manufacture New York developing my products, they're able to talk to their factories that are producing for other clients and say, hey, can you guys hold on to that stuff? And I think I have someone who's interested in it. So I think that really just going grassroots is the way to go.
There is something that I've seen, you may know them as well, there's an Estonian initiative. Yeah. There's an Estonian initiative where they're trying to map what kind of waste is being generated in what factories, so that companies that want to work with that waste know about it ahead of time. Because for some products, doing zero waste, like any of us do it might not be the most appropriate thing to do. Or at least I think, like some of the sort of most iconic pieces that we all wear, like a pair of jeans, for example. I mean, if you're going to stick with the basic design of a 5-pocket pair of jeans, there's always going to be a little bit of waste. It's not particularly large. You can actually cut jeans fairly with a little waste, but there's always going to be some, I think, for some products. And in those cases, if you can have a system where the maker of the waste is paired up with someone who can actually make something with it, those are the kinds of solutions that I'm also interested in this space.
Yeah, Timo's referring to Rita Aus. She's an Estonian designer that does a zero waste collection. But she also has a website which is called, and a product which she has, a digital space called Waste Mapping, where manufacturers who have waste fabric can post what they have and designers can connect with them through the website. It's based in Estonia, so it's very regionalized, but it's something that I actually feel very strongly, and I need to talk to, I've talked to Bob before about it, and it's a conversation we have to have about how do we mimic that in New York, especially as manufacturing is returning here, so is more waste, and so are talented designers that can utilize that waste. So I think that's a real future conversation.
Yeah, I just want to say that, I mean, that's something that we'll actively foster here in the manufacturing hub at Manufacture New York. We already have some of the tools in place to develop that, have a lot of experience working with industrial ecology, so we will actively foster it. It's already happening organically with Daniel and others, but you come into the hub, there'll be programs in place and sort of online tools to help people match up. So.
And just to sort of round it out, I'm a real big fan of the cold call. So I like to figure out who has trash that I want and just find the best number. Start asking around like, hi, can I speak to the person in charge of carting away your trash? And they're like, no solicitation. I'm like, definitely not soliciting you. So, yeah, that kind of thing.
I will say that actually Eileen Fisher also out of their Irvington lab store have a pretty good waste program there, and they will supply waste to emerging designers through that as well. They have a phenomenal space out in Irvington with tons of really premium waste.
And actually, Laura Sansone, who spoke on the panel yesterday for the textile fabric creation, she has green ivy pieces for the indigo dyeing workshop, and she kind of talked to me about maybe doing some green ivy stuff at this space as well, so definitely.
Great. So you had a question?
Yeah. So I see that our world's like growing and it's really, really fast paced in manufacturing. How do we get it so that does it take a long time to get it there, or does it take more time, and why? And would it be more expensive to have it be reusable?
So I heard a presentation at Manufacture a couple of months ago, and without getting into too much detail or giving away other people's ideas, technology and sustainability need to be more linked, and technology moves very, very quickly, but there are a lot of things about technology that can help us be more sustainable. So it's not necessarily the idea of having it be reusable or having it make sure it breaks down over time or whatever. It's like, don't produce a whole cow just for leather. Grow it in a lab. Or can you make things that, we're not talking about biodegrading over years, we're talking about you throw it in the ocean and it just falls apart. You know, this cool things that technology can do to help us be more sustainable. So if we do want to have fast fashion, if we do want to have disposable products, we can dispose of them responsibly.
Yeah, but once again, it requires the entire supply chain be involved the whole time with intention. And right now we've got a major communication barrier across the supply chain. Any other questions? Yes.
I'm curious about how you deal with the challenges of zero waste with wholesale and also you're maintaining a brand image. Like just looking at the marker that you had team up before, there was no waste in that fabric, but how do you just create the same body season after season, and then it seems like it's just, or if you're dealing with wholesalers, what happens if there's reorders and like the trash that you were using is gone? Or is that just part of the educational process that happens with?
I think so. There's some actually there's a lot of precedents for it. I remember one story about 5 or 6 years ago. Loomstate did these upcycled ponchos for Barney's, and I forget, or they used old blankets for something like basically they got a whole lot of material, none of which was uniform. So I think it was blankets, and it was all sorts of like different colors, different patterns, and also different size of blankets. And so there had to be a conversation between Loomstate and Barney's about like these things are going to come in and they're going to have to be all different, but they'll like roughly look like this. And there's other brands. I mean, Junkie Styling in the UK, they are no longer around, but they did upcycling for about 17 years, something like that. They basically made garments out of suits and men's business shirts, both women's wear and men's wear. And again, they couldn't always guarantee that, you know, well, I don't think they could ever guarantee that everything would look the same. Like, you know, if a store ordered 15 or something, for example, but they could roughly say, like, yeah, they're going to be black or thereabouts, and they're going to have some kind of pinstripe or something like that. So there's that kind of flexibility, I think, needs to be educated. Like, retailers need to be educated for those kinds of things. And then, I mean, you're pointing out to a very good question, because one of the critiques about my work is that it couldn't be mass-produced, and some of the things that I've done in the past probably couldn't. And I did say in the conclusion of my PhD that much more research needed to happen with actual brands, with actual companies doing this. And I just got emailed this week, and I forget the universities. I think it's a university in Georgia, but somebody is going to do a master's project, and they're going to focus just on grading zero waste in their master's, which is great. It's scary for me because they're actually going to take a chunk of my PhD and start testing it in real life. They could come out and say, well, you didn't know anything. And that's fine. I mean, like it's going to forward the conversation whichever way it goes, and that's the important thing. So that, and I would love to have more conversations with really large manufacturers, like companies that do tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of units, and see really what the challenges are. Because even grading, I mean, if you're going to have a size range of 5 or 6 sizes, and all of them be zero waste, they need to be designed. You can't grade in the conventional manner. You need to rethink and reframe what grading actually is. It needs to become part of the design process, and that's where it can get more expensive, because grading is a very cheap thing. Computers just do it. Whereas if you have to have tinkering happen, it can slow things down. But I do think that we need to slow down anyway, in terms of the volumes of things that we design, both design and then make.
Great. I would say, by the way, guys, this is going to have to be our last question, and then we'll have the wrap up.
I'll just add to something Timo touched on, which was education. I think educating the actual retailer is key, and I had this conversation a few years ago with Ursula de Castro, who's the founder of Aesthetica, the ethical fashion week in the UK, but also the brand From Somewhere. So she's been upcycling forever, and she had to go through the process of educating her retailers so they couldn't say, I want this, because no other pieces were ever going to look like that. Right. They had to be much more open about being a color story, or a graphic story, or a floral story, and that the uniqueness of each piece was the selling point. But she had to go through that whole educational process with the retailers, and she did it successfully. So it can be done.
Yeah, I'd say definitely. I think it's special to have things that are unique. You might want the same silhouette, but you don't want to be wearing the same thing that everybody else is wearing, especially if you're into fashion. So for me, that's my important brand philosophy, and something I follow.
So the first 5 years of my brand, I actually focused only on new fabrics and using all of them. So what you're talking about specifically, and sort of where Timo ran into trouble and what they're going to be testing, is what I focused on. And the first thing was that I always, always, always designed with grading in mind. So my seam allowances changed from size to size. And I actually got a call from a buyer once saying, why does this one look different, that one look different? And I said, just measure them, because they're correct on the outside, the insides are my problem. And it is really, really possible, but what we sort of have to do as designers and as educators and in the conversation is start training designers. You know, designing has been dumbed down and watered down in the last, 10 years even, to a point where if you can sketch or you go shopping, you're a designer. And what it really entails is thinking through from the beginning to the end and building a skill set where you can say, I want my goal to be zero waste, and I want my goal to be an A-line skirt, and I want to be able to do that in 12 sizes. And that's where you start from. So as a designer, people say, my process is I start with this inspiration, my process is I start with that. But I very much work in a way, like what Timo spoke about earlier, how wide is the fabric? Whatever we're using, how wide is it? Because that's where you need to start in order to be zero waste, is working from the end backwards. And if you're going to use everything, you need to start with everything.
Yeah, that's a great way to end the conversation for now. Obviously, it's an ongoing conversation. Thank you so much to our panelists. Let's give them a round of applause. I would just say that, maybe some elements of engineering need to start being implemented, and some of the process thought of engineering needs to be brought into the design curriculum at schools. That might be a good part. So, okay, thank you guys.
Thank you so much.